Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Andy Schoonover is the founder of CrowdHealth, a company he founded to address serious issues with our current health insurance model. Sadly, every single year, 250,000 insured individuals are forced to declare bankruptcy due to medical expenses. Wow. This serves as a clear indication that the current system is ineffective and primarily benefits the medical industry. Frustrated by the lack of justifiable explanations, Andy has chosen to focus on building a superior solution. Conventional health insurance often lacks personal touch and reliability, driven by distorted incentives, However, at CrowdHealth, the focus is on changing this narrative. Members are treated like family, receiving assistance throughout their health journey, and having their bills managed at an affordable price. The aim is to create a system that prioritizes keeping members healthy rather than profiting from their illnesses. Ultimately, the goal is to redefine the concept of healthcare in society. This realization ultimately led Andy to understand that the system was flawed, prompting him to establish CrowdHealth as a more compassionate and dependable alternative for healthcare payment. Visit www.joincrowdhealth.com to learn more. Andy Schoonover, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Man, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's such an honor. I'm so excited for this conversation. Before we dig in, I have to ask, you live in Austin. How was the Formula One race that happened this weekend at the time of the recording?
Yeah, man, incredible. We were talking about it before we got on and just had a great time. The weather was beautiful. The people were great. You know, the fun thing about this is that there was the guy that was hosting me. I asked who had gone to all the Formula One races. So I don't know what it was, like 20 Formula One races. And he said that favorite place to go is the United States and specifically, Austin. So it was pretty neat to experience.
That's amazing. Yeah, the first year that Formula One came to Austin specifically was, I believe, in 2012, and there was maybe like 100,000 people that even went. Like, I was completely unaware of Formula One at the time. And since Netflix has released that amazing series, Drive to Survive, tons of people are hooked into it. I'm hooked into it. My wife loves it. And now they're getting over 400,000 attendees over the course of a weekend. It's insane.
Crazy.
That's so crazy.
Given it took me 2 hours to get home, I do not doubt it. They had the Killers on Friday night, which I'm a big Killers fan for the music fans out there. So it was a really fun time.
That's amazing. And drivers love the track. They love eating lots of barbecue. That's all they really tend to talk about, which is amazing in Austin. And super fun. And I'll just tell the listener, I don't care if you don't care about car racing. I don't care about car racing traditionally. Watch the first 5 minutes of season 1, episode 1. Give it 5 minutes. If you hate it, turn it off. Don't worry about it. But odds are, I think you might get a little bit addicted.
And you'll lose several hours of your life as a result.
You will lose or invest, depending on how you want to.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
That's amazing. Dude, okay, so I will often joke on my show that I'm asking like honest questions or selfish questions, and this entire episode is going to be me asking very, very selfish questions. I think a lot of people are in the kind of position that I'm in. I never really wanted to be an entrepreneur. We, my wife and I were both working for the big corporate gym. Pandemic, they put us on unemployment. We started our own company, and here we are. One of the really nice things about working for a big corporation is benefits. And we lost all of them. And shopping around for health insurance, it's absurd. It's astounding what the prices are. And learning the system is crazy, but then telling our families that we don't have health insurance, they bitch at us about it. It's hugely problematic. And you seem to have found a pretty cool solution.
Yeah. No, we health insurance is a disaster. Going and searching for it and figuring it out. Funny story is I had my roommate from business school. I went to Stanford. He was number 1 or number 2 in our class. And he said, the one thing that makes me feel like an idiot is health insurance, like co-pays and co-insurance and deductibles. And, they give you 42 different options when you get there. And it's just like, what the hell is going on? And so I really tried to build a company that was simple. Simplicity is a core value of ours. We try to keep everything simple. And it is an alternative to health insurance that's way more effective, way more fun. It's weird to say that about healthcare, but we have a great time. And you're in a community of people much like us who we want to take care of ourselves. We are, in our 30s and our 40s generally, and we're fit, and therefore the healthcare costs for the community are really, really low. As opposed to you putting money into, a big pool of of capital where a bunch of the people who are pulling money out of that capital aren't taking care of themselves. They are obese. They are, doing things that you and I wouldn't be doing and are making bad choices. And so, you're really in a community of people who are taking care of themselves. So we got a lot of pregnancies. We've got a lot of active injuries, a lot of mountain bike face plants, things like that just happen when you're active and you're in your 30s and 40s. So it's a good group of people to be a part of.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think about that all the time. Like, why would I subsidize somebody who is not taking care of themselves and they're chronically sick? I haven't been to the doctor in like 10 years, but what's going to happen to me is that face plant on the mountain bike. I'm going to get clobbered by a semi truck on my road bike. Like, that's what I worry about. That's going to be hugely expensive. And so not being covered is really uncomfortable for those situations, but it's cool to know that you've found a solution, which we're definitely going to talk about. We're definitely going to talk about,
Sure.
The nexus of starting the company and why you decided to do that. But before we do, I want to learn about your own health journey. I know that you're kind of, you've been kind of keto, low carb, carnivore-ish for a while. So can you tell us a little bit about what that, health story was for yourself?
Yeah, I think there's something about getting off of health insurance. And I've talked to this a little bit with the Meat Mafia guys who we talked about before we got on. Once you become sovereign over your own health and don't outsource that to a health insurance company, your just perspective on your body changes. You take a lot more agency over your own body. And so it was, several years ago when I became uninsured, that I started taking care of myself, and I was at the time, I think I was somewhere around 215, 220. I'm 6'2". And so I started with what is it called? Whole30.
Yeah.
Right. My wife wanted me to get into Whole30. And so I did Whole30 for a while. And I found that was great. There's still something a little missing. I wasn't really losing the weight that I wanted to. Then kind of got into keto, low carb, and I went from 215 to 180 in that. I'm I know you're got a bunch of fit folks, but I was in the mid 20s in terms of like body fat, and I'm now down to 12 or 13.
Nice.
And so, I'm getting just taking care of your body. And ultimately, what I want for myself and what I want for others too, is like, I want to, in my 80s, be running around the backyard with my grandkids. Like, that's my desire, and I've seen too many people close to me who aren't able to do that. I'm like, man, it sucks to be able to get to your 80s and, have these grandkids you want to play with you. And, everybody who's a grandparent always says like, it's even better to having kids, so I was like, man, I want that for myself and I want that for other people too. So, I have taken that on as a personal thing. My wife has as well. We're trying to, through CrowdHealth, get other people to start understanding how their body works and operates and what, labs you should be getting and what tests you should be getting and things like that. So we're trying to educate people. But, I have said that there's three passions of mine in life. One is to break the healthcare system, because I think all these people going bankrupt, as you mentioned, is a crime. Two is I want to break the food system, because the fact that we have 70% of the people in our country are obese, 88% of the people in our country are metabolically unhealthy. I want to break the food system, and I want to break the monetary system, because I think it's a whole different conversation. But I'm a big Bitcoiner myself. Maybe some of the people out there are as well, but I think the monetary system is screwing people too. And so I've been able to build a company where I've been able to address each one of these things that I'm just super passionate about. And that's the great thing about building a company. I can really focus it on things that I'm fired up about, and I think could change the planet if it actually works.
Man, I love that. Yeah, I was just reflecting yesterday. I went to the store to go grab, a little bit of ground beef to cook up for dinner. And you see the dude, he's in his 50s or 60s, and he's like leaning over on this like giant walking stick. He can barely move around. He's like so buckled over. It sucks that we've gotten to this place where, again, healthcare costs are so expensive and crazy because of a lot of what we've been told for the last, 60, 70 years about nutrition. It's really terrible. Tell us a story about how all this came about in your own personal life. It sounds like this had to do something with your daughter, right?
Yeah, sure. So I this is my second company. My first company I sold a while back, and as such, I didn't have health insurance because most of us get health insurance through our employers. And so it was coming off of that company. I went to Obamacare. I thought it was my only option. And so I got a plan, and it was, I don't know, something like $1,200 for me, my wife, and my two girls per month. And I joke, it worked until I had to use it. So my little one, who was one at the time, was having recurring ear infections, and so we went to the ear, nose, and throat doc, who said she's got a hole in her eardrum. So we went to the local hospital, got a surgery. It was a 15-minute surgery, and I got the bill a few weeks later, and it was $8,000. And I was like, "Holy crap, $8,000 for a 15-minute surgery!" I was like, "This is the whole point of health insurance. Like this is why I do this." Great, Little did I know, a few weeks later, I got another note, this time from my health insurance plan, that said that it was medically unnecessary, and so they refused to pay for it. And so we went through 3 rounds of this, my doctor fighting with their doctor, and they're like, "Look, we're not paying for it." I was like, "Dude, she had a hole in her eardrum. Like, how do you not pay for this?" And after doing a lot of research, what I found is a lot of these plans, they just deny claims left and right. So last year, it was either last year or the year before, I can't remember, 48 million claims were denied. That's almost 20% of claims were denied. You have a 1 in 5 chance of your claim getting denied if you're on an Obamacare plan. And I was just like, screw this. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. And so I ditched that plan, and I saved myself $1,200 a month, and I was uninsured. And so my wife and I were like, okay, how do we do this being uninsured? Built some tools, figured some things out. And, that ultimately led me to start CrowdHealth, because I was like, there are other people out there that are, one, either pissed off with health insurance or are uninsured and looking for something, but just can't find anything because the alternatives out there suck. And so that's why I started CrowdHealth.
That's amazing. Was it nerve-wracking in the beginning? It's one thing, like my wife and I, to not be insured. Like, I can make sure that I ride my road bike a little bit further, closer to the sidewalk than the road itself. I can, ride the more mellow trails that I used to ride 10 years ago to minimize the chances of me face planting on my mountain bike. But we don't have kids. Was it difficult for you to make that decision with kids?
As I started thinking about it, like, I'm a finance guy by background, and I was like, okay, what is the worst thing that could happen? Right? Like, I could get a massive $1 million bill or something like that. And, cancer or whatever it ends up being. And so I was like, okay, so if this is cancer, if it's really bad, probably what the hospital is going to do, and just say it's $1 million bill, they know they're not going to get $1 million from me, because I'm going to fight like hell. They're not going to get $1 million from me. I'm going to be able to negotiate that down. I'm going to be able to negotiate it down to, very, very little. Probably. And then they're going to stretch it out over a period of time for me. And so I will have to pay monthly payments for a long time because something really big happens. But guess what? I pay monthly payments for a long time for health insurance, which I don't get crap from anyway. So I'm just going to be like, I'm just going to risk it. And the probability of me or you, what are you, in your 30s, 20s, 30s?
Yeah, just about to turn 40.
40, man. You're young, dude. No. So, like, the probability of one of us like having something like that is minute. It's so tiny. And so we're much more likely to have an ACL tear or something like that. Right. And even those, an ACL tear, you can get fixed for $12,000, and they'll spread it out over 2 years. So I'm paying $500 a month for a couple of years to pay for my ACL, which is, I was paying $1,200 from a health insurance anyway. Like, what is the point? And so that's kind of the math that I went through. And I said, the probability of something really, really bad happening is so low.
That's crazy.
And then the outcome of that is still doable, feasible, if I can stretch it out over a period of time and negotiate it down and things like that. And so I was like, what if CrowdHealth negotiated that down? And what if CrowdHealth helped you with stretching out those payments? Or even better, what if CrowdHealth could be able to gather a group of like-minded people who would say, hey, man, if you have something happen, I'll help you out. If I have something to happen, will you help me out? And so if you get a group of people who are all like-minded, who are willing to raise their hand to help others out, then you have something where if something really big happens, then you have a community of people who are around you and gathered and say, hey, I'll help you out, man, like, for sure. And by the way, that's the way it's happened for hundreds of years before the 1970s, when health insurance plans came in. And, healthcare in the past has been very inexpensive. And it wasn't until the 70s, just like our monetary system, shit hit the fan and our healthcare expenses, spiked to the moon. And so it's these insurance companies that have gotten in here, and we can talk about why that happened. But, we've been doing this for a long time. We're just kind of going back to the future, is basically what I like to say. And so it's, we've had 5,500 people or something like that sign up. We've had, I think, 9,000 bills now that have been submitted, and everything from cancer cases. We have a brain surgery next week. We've had NICU babies. We've had heart surgeries. We've had, car accidents, motorcycle accidents, all kinds of stuff that our customers, our members have stepped up and said, I'm willing to help out. So it's worked great so far.
Yeah, it's incredible and very brilliant. And yeah, maybe now would be a good time to talk about the conventional system. And let's start with what you mentioned. Like, how did we get to the point that we're at today? We'll talk about that too. But like, what has been the history and what happened in the 70s that kind of screwed everything up?
Yeah, I mean, basically in the 70s, you had the HMO Act of, I think it was 1973 or something like that, where it basically put into law the fact that these health insurance plans can build these networks, and that you can then choose from any doctor in this network to be able to go to, and then you pool your resources behind it, and kind of built the modern day, health insurance space. And there's things in the past for 50 years before that were a lot more like what we're doing and a lot less like health insurance plans. But the problem that started when they thought these networks were such a beautiful thing. So for everybody out there who's not familiar, health insurance plans have networks. They have pre-negotiated rates with these doctors or these hospitals, so that when you go there, they have a contractual agreement. You know exactly how much it is going to get paid. We don't as the patient, but the two businesses do. And so everybody thought this was a great idea because the health insurance plans would have all this power to go in and negotiate really low rates with this network. The problem with that is that as hospital systems have been able to consolidate. So, for example, I live in Austin. There's 2 hospital systems here. So if you can imagine, United Healthcare comes in and says, hey, I want to negotiate with you, St. David's and Ascension Seton. And St. David's and Ascension says, you need both of us or you're going to lose all your business in Austin. So I'm not going to negotiate with you. And United's like, okay. And the prices go up because if you're a hospital, you want the prices to go up. And so why does United Healthcare not really care about that? Well, in Obamacare, basically what they said is that health insurance plans can only profit 15% of premiums. Okay, so if I have $1,000 premium, I can only have $150 of profit. It's actually profit and administrative expenses, but same deal. So $1,000, $150 in profit. So how do I get to grow my profit by 10% to 165? My premiums have to go from 1,000 to 1,100. So I, as the health insurance plan, who's supposed to be working on the patient's behalf, right, now have an incentive to see prices go up. So, sorry if this is kind of a long-winded way of saying this, but the buyer of healthcare, which is health plans, and the sellers of healthcare, which is these hospital systems, they both want the price to go up. So, what's going to happen? You don't have to have a PhD in economics to figure this out, right? If the buyer and seller both want the price to go up, the price is going up. And so that's the dynamic that's been created over the last 50 years, and that's why we're seeing, prices go up, 3 times the rate of inflation. So that's the issue that we've had over the last 20 years, especially, but really 50 years.
It's so messed up, dude. It's so bizarre. And then, like, even as I was working for this big corporation, obviously they subsidized my health insurance, which is fine. And I think I was on some high deductible plan because I don't use health insurance. I don't go to the medical community.
Right.
It was so expensive to pay monthly my share. And then the deductible was like, I'm never going to hit this deductible unless I'm in like the ICU or whatever. Like it's insane
exactly.
how expensive it is.
Yeah, exactly. And even on some of these Obamacare plans, if you go into the emergency room, your deductible could be $10,000, $12,000, $14,000, which means you're paying the first $10,000 of that medical bill before the health insurance plan will pick up $1.
That's
so
crazy.
if you don't have $10,000 in your bank account, you're toast if you have a $10,000 deductible. Like you have to go figure out, how to sell stuff to make your deductible. And that's why for CrowdHealth, we're like, look, we ask you to pay the first $500. If you have a mountain bike fall, $500. If you tear your ACL, $500. You have a motorcycle accident, it's $500. Like, so anybody can come up with, or the vast majority of people can come up with $500.
Yeah.
Right. The vast majority of people can't come up with $10,000. And that's why people are going bankrupt, because they don't have $10,000 to cover their deductible. And so it's putting people into bankruptcy, which I think is a tragedy.
Yeah. I wonder all the time, like every time I go on there to the Obamacare website to shop around and just like check out prices, like how do people afford this? This is like about as much as my mortgage. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's very, very expensive, even on what I thought was supposed to be an affordable kind of a system for people who don't have corporate health insurance. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, corporate health insurance is costing, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, $7,000 for an individual and $22,000 or $23,000 for a family. And so people are like, well, at least my employer pays for it. And I tell them, I was like, look, the money that they're paying for health insurance, they're not paying you. So in essence, you are paying for it. Because you're not getting, the salary that you could have gotten because they have to pay for your health insurance. That kind of goes into one bucket. And so, and to give you kind of an idea of CrowdHealth, like our families over the last 12 months have paid under $6,000. So the corporate health insurance has paid 22 or 23. CrowdHealth has paid something like 6 for a family of 4. And for an individual, it was like, $1,500 or something like that, $1,200. And so it's dramatically different than the health insurance plans out there.
Yeah. Okay. So we just switched car insurance a few months ago, switched to State Farm, like a good neighbor, State Farm's there, whatever. They send us a little Bluetooth connected device that I put in my car to make sure I'm not driving like, a terrible Formula One driver bumping into everybody, speeding, braking too hard, whatever. It rates me, right? And it incentivizes me to drive smarter, to not be on my cell phone when I'm driving. And if I drive safe, according to their metrics, I get a discount. And health insurance, again, it's not even like any other kind of insurance. It doesn't work like that at all.
No, it's actually illegal. You can't do that. You cannot base how much you pay for health insurance on how healthy you are, how unhealthy you are, how much you weigh. None of those metrics. And so for us, it's like, look, we've got the metrics that we're looking at is our average age is 34. So it's a young population. The BMI is somewhere between 4 and 5 points lower than the national average. Our number one group of people are entrepreneurs and freelancers who come in and join us. And so like, I'm looking at all these metrics and I'm saying, we just got a healthy group of people, every month, it's like 30% of the crowdfunding requirements is pregnancies. And somewhere around 25% is active injuries. And then the rest is a smattering of, illnesses and, wellness visits and things like that. So it is very, very clear our members are having lots of babies and they're having lots of active injuries, which for me, I don't know about you, but like, I'm happy to help people out with babies and active injuries. Like, yeah, God bless you. Go reproduce and stay active. Like that's what our country needs.
Yeah, totally. So interesting. Okay. I've got one more question about the conventional kind of system before we really deep dive into what you're doing. And this is on the doctor side. If I ask any doctor, what's the biggest gripe? What part of your job blows? Yeah. The same answer pretty much from everybody is like, my job requires my 40 hours and then I spend another 20 doing insurance BS. Like, I can't remember what the number of staff that's required at a doctor's office. If it was just for taking care of you, it would be like a receptionist and a doctor and a nurse. And it's way bigger than that. I don't know what the numbers are. I'm sure you do, but
3 to 1, basically. Three billing people for every doctor.
Oh my goodness. Can you explain how that side of things works in the conventional medical system on the doctor's end of things, how they get paid, what incentivizes them, that kind of thing?
Yeah, oftentimes the doctors have to get approval from the health insurance plans to do specific procedures. So, they their EHRs have the ability to ping the health insurance plan, and the health insurance plan says yes or no. If the health insurance plan says no, then the doctor's got to call them. They got to battle it out and say, we really need this. And so in essence, what the doctors are complaining about is they're saying the health insurance plan is basically practicing medicine, even though they're not licensed to practice medicine, because they're telling us what we can or cannot do with our patient. And so then if they said they can do it, then they actually have to bill it, which, like I said, you have 3 people to actually get the paperwork from the doctor's office to the health insurance plan. Plus the doctor has to spend a bunch of time on doing that. And so, what would happen if you could show up and pay them with their credit card, where you get paid immediately, you don't have to get approval for it, you get the cash right away, and you're getting charged 1.5% or 2% or something like that on credit card fees, as opposed to having to spend 30% of your time, dealing with health insurance plans and a big chunk of money. In essence, what happens in that scenario is doctors can charge now 30 or 40% less for the same procedure if you show up with a credit card versus them having to bill health insurance. So, that's what we're trying to leverage at CrowdHealth, is saying, like, let's enable our people to pay in cash, because doctors freaking hate health insurance. Like, every single doctor I talk to, they say, hey, what do you do? I was like, I'm trying to replace health insurance. They're like, God bless you, please. Can I invest? Like, what is it going to take? What is it going to take? Because if you're thinking about this, right, like, the fact that I have to ask somebody else if I can do my job, which I've been trained to do for, in many cases, in these doctors, 10, 12, 14 years of school, and residencies and things like that. That would be annoying. Like, if somebody sat on your shoulder and told you how to run your podcast, you'd be like, dude, this is my podcast. Don't tell me how to run it. Like, let me do my thing. If somebody sat on my shoulder and told me how to be a CEO, I'd be like, dude, like, let me run my company, And so the doctors hate that crap. They hate it. And they're like, if the sooner you can get health insurance out of my life, the better. Is there a way that I can transition all the way to cash pay and get rid of health insurance completely? Most doctors would love that situation.
That really surprised me. And I only really learned that from being uninsured. My wife has had some blood work done and a few other little things here and there. And it's like, you tell somebody, the receptionist, like, we don't have health insurance. They're like, oh, you can pay cash and here's a discount. And like, you can get prescriptions for way cheaper. It's like, how does that make any sense?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a psyop that is going on, that people think that these insurance plans are actually fighting for you, that they're actually getting you really great rates. And the reality of that is that's just false. That's a false narrative. It's a myth. You can 95 times out of 100 get significantly better rates by showing up with a credit card than paying with your health insurance plan. That's a fact. And now I have thousands of bills to prove it.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about your company. Tell us, like, kind of brass tacks. How does this work? How do you run this business and run it successfully? How does it work for the person, paying into this? How does it work for somebody who's trying to receive money from this?
Yeah. So we'll take the example of a single person. A single person will pay CrowdHealth two times per month. The first time is $50. That $50 per person comes to CrowdHealth. It pays all of our bills. That's the only revenue that we get. And the reason we do that is because we want it to be very transparent what money we get and what money goes to other people in the community. Because one of the things we have trouble with health insurance is there is no transparency. And so we take our $50. That's the only place in which we touch the money. There's another additional up to $125 that you are going to send to another person in the community who has a health event. So let's just say Casey, he's out running, playing, soccer or whatever, tears his ACL. And it's, he goes to an orthopedic surgeon. Orthopedic surgeon says, you know what, Casey, this is a bad one. It's going to be $22,000. Casey calls CrowdHealth and says, hey, I tore my ACL. My orthopedic surgeon it thinks it's going to be a $22,000 surgery. And so we said, okay, well, let us negotiate with him. This actually happened in Austin not too long ago, ACL. $22,000 was it. So we called the orthopedic surgeon. We said, hey, if we pay you if our member pays you in cash on the day of the surgery, will you give them a discount? He's like, yeah, I'll give them a discount. And so I said, okay, well, would you consider doing it not in the hospital, but in the surgery center? He's like, yeah, I'll do it in the surgery center. And so how much would it be if we paid you, or if our member paid you in cash and you did it at a surgery center? He said, well, that would be about $12,000. So we called, and in 1 hour, not even 1 hour, it's more like a 15-minute conversation, got that billed from $22,000 to $12,000. Casey would pay the first $500. We would submit the remaining $11,500 to, let's just say, 115 people for $100 each. And so, if those people say yes, I'll help out Casey, then that $100 goes from their bank account to Casey's bank account, and ultimately, at the end of the day, Casey will have enough in his bank account to go and pay for that ACL tear. So, in essence, what we're doing is we're crowdfunding your ACL tear from a group of people who have, raised their hand and said, if anybody in the community has, a health event, I'm willing to help. So we present you one opportunity a month to help somebody out in the community. You can say yes, you can say no. If you say yes, then we transfer that money. If you say no, we move on to the next person until we, figure out a way to get Casey his money. Like I said, we've had somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 bills that have been submitted. Everyone submitted to the community has gotten paid. Like every bill that the community had the ability to fund got paid. And this is from $50 pediatric visit to hundreds of thousands of dollars in a brain hemorrhage member. And so that's the way that it works. It was so different than health insurance. I'm sure there's questions on it, but it has worked like so incredibly well.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so first of all, I guess a question on the negotiation. So part of what I'm paying CrowdHealth for is to be able to negotiate with the provider to be able to, bring that cost down. You guys probably have learned tons of stuff on how to do that. Like, for example, the hospital versus the surgical center. I didn't know there was a difference between the two. It's a huge difference in cost, but like explain that. Like, what the hell's the difference where the surgery is done?
Yeah, the surgery center. So surgery centers are such a beautiful thing because one, nobody likes to go into a hospital. It smells bad. It feels bad, especially post-COVID crap. Like nobody wants to be in a hospital. These surgery centers look more like, Westin hotels than they do hospitals. They are set up specifically to do outpatient surgeries, which is the vast majority of surgeries that are done. So any outpatient surgery, which means you have the surgery and you leave, you don't stay. Although there are some that do inpatient, they're able to do it at probably 40% less, sometimes 50 or 60% less than the hospital is willing to do it for. And so that's the beauty of doing it at a surgery center. So it's same doctor, same anesthesiologist, just you're doing it at a surgery center instead of a hospital, significantly less, tons of savings there.
Are the scalpels 50% worse or 50% less sharp or something like?
No, it takes, a couple things is surgery centers typically only take cash. So you have to pay in cash. And so that takes a bunch of the bureaucratic BS out of the hospital system. And then, the hospitals are basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to do everything under one roof for everybody. And it's just not an efficient model, right? Like the surgery centers, let's say it this way. What if a car manufacturer, and Tesla probably is going to prove me wrong here. What if a car manufacturer tried to manufacture the tires, the engines, the windshield wipers, the doors, the windows, everything within, one, building? It becomes very inefficient because the people who are really good at making glass for the windows are not necessarily really good at making the tires for the wheels, right? And so the same thing happens within, I think, hospitals is like these hospitals try to do everything under one roof and they think it's going to be way more efficient. But in essence, what it does is it does not allow you to specialize in one thing. So, let's look at it a different way. Would you prefer to have a surgeon that does 4 ACL surgeries a day, or would you prefer a surgeon who does 4 ACL surgeries a month or a year, right? Like, the surgeon who does 4 ACL surgeries a day, they do, 100 a month, and they have seen all the complications. They've seen lots and lots of ACLs. And so they're just going to be better at it. They're going to be faster at it. There's going to be less complications. And so it's just a cheaper environment to do that, is if you have some specialists who can do this. And a lot of times they do that within surgery centers.
Wow.
So that's the reason why, surgery centers are, super inexpensive. But the primary reason is the billing is way less. The administration is way less than these big bureaucratic hospitals.
Yeah. And the overnight stay is a thing too, right? Like usually hospitals will try to get you to stay like 2 or 3 nights afterwards when it's usually not necessary.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example, and this just happened to me. So for people who are following on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, a couple of weeks ago, I was hospitalized. Went to the ER. They thought I had a stroke, of all things. By the two hours in, they realized it wasn't a stroke. It was a complex migraine, but they decided to keep me overnight just to make sure. Well, that overnight visit was really, really expensive, as you can imagine. Right before I left, the physical therapist and the occupational therapist came in and they said, "Hey, we just want to make sure that you're okay so that you can go home safely." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "You guys told me I had a migraine." And they're like, "Yeah, this is just a formality." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." And they're like, "Can you put on these pair of socks and can you brush your teeth and we'll just watch you?" And I was like, "Great." So, they're chatting with my wife. I put on a pair of socks. I brush my teeth. And they said, we walked down the hall 20 feet. So I walked down the hall 20 feet. I came back. They were there for 10 minutes. They billed me 6 15-minute visits. Each one was between $300 and $400. So it was about $2,000 worth of bills that they billed me for a formality at the end of my complex migraine visit. And so I'm like, what the hell? Like, and so given I'm responsible ultimately for this bill, like I'm calling, the hospital, and, CrowdHealth will do this on my behalf if I ask them to. Be like, what the hell are you charging me $2,000 for this, this visit that, lasted 10 minutes? It doesn't make any sense as a formality. So, we get involved in those things and help you, walk you through these bills to say, hey, what did they do here? What did they do here? And so we can kind of walk you through that bill and we'll find stuff that is bogus. And fight with the hospital on your behalf. So that's a service that we provide.
That's amazing. And thank you for explaining the difference, surgeons and hospital systems and I guess more like the surgical centers. I think of it like, would I rather have a plate of pasta from the Cheesecake Factory that has pretty much every cuisine on the planet, or would I rather go to Franklin's and order brisket when they do 1,000 pounds of brisket every single day? I think I'll end up in the line at Franklin's.
That's a perfect example. Yeah, that's a perfect example.
That's crazy. Okay, now you also mentioned something interesting earlier, where you said there was a limit of for an individual. It's a limit of $125. Does that mean that if I'm paying in, my monthly rate might be variable depending on what is needed in the community, but it will never exceed that?
Yeah, it won't exceed 125. So this month we're asking for 100. I think next month will be a little bit lower than that. And it's variable based upon what is going on in the community that month. So this month we had a couple of NICU babies. We have a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma case. Like we had some legit, cases this month. So we had to bump it up a little bit. And I don't foresee that happening next month. I probably think it's going to come down a little bit. So it does, what we say is for people is like budget for 125. And then if it's less than that, celebrate, go and take your, wife or husband or whatever out to dinner, or, invest in Bitcoin, or, do whatever you want with that money, because we're never going to ask for it again. It's yours. Keep it wherever you want, spend it, save it, whatever you want to do. We're never going to ask for that. So we only ask for people to help for the events that happen in that month. And so that's why it's a little bit variable. And some people are kind of like, oh, I wish it was just the same every month. I'm like, look, budget for 125 and celebrate if it's less.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just got free money. And so, and most of the times health insurance plans, they keep that extra money. They put it in a big pool, which, with inflation, the value of that is going down. They will sometimes invest it and get interest off it and all that kind of stuff. And guess what? You don't get that. The health insurance plan gets that. And so we're like, man, you keep your money, you do with it what you want. You get benefit from that as opposed to, any corporation getting benefit from that.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So if I'm paying in, do I know exactly where my dollars are going? So like it's, October, the fee is $100 this month. Do I know that I'm helping Tony in Cincinnati, or do I know that I'm helping the community at large? It goes into a pool that pays out all the claims evenly.
Man. Yeah. Great question. Great question. And I think that's our biggest differentiator versus health insurance. And so we will send you an email once a month. It's going to be converted to our app here in the next couple of months, but we'll send you an email. We'll say that, a male in Salt Lake City tore his ACL, and he is requesting, $100 or whatever for, his ACL. And so you can set up that setting to say, automatically approve that or automatically deny that or whatever. So there's some settings in the back end that allow you to automate some of those things, but exactly where your $100 is going that month. And so, as opposed to sending it to this big corporation, United Healthcare, where you have no idea where it's going, your money is going directly from Casey to Andy or Mary or Amy or whatever, to help them with their health event. We do not get in the middle of it. We don't touch it. It's a peer-to-peer transaction. And that's a super cool thing. One quick story is we had a woman, which one should I tell? Because there's so many. A few months ago, it's probably 6 or 9 months ago by this time, we had a woman who had a miscarriage and had some, complications and had some medical expenses. And so we sent out a request, and we had a bunch of women, I think there was like 3 or 4, that responded and said, hey, this is a part of my story too. I had a miscarriage. I know what this family is going through. Can I, instead of $100, can I give her $200? Because I want to help in any way that I can. I'm like, I was blown away because I was like, never in a million years would you, call your health insurance plan and say, can I give an extra $100 this month? Like, it just wouldn't happen.
Never.
But the way that we say fund humans, not health insurance. Like, your money is funding other human beings as opposed to funding big health insurance corporations. And so we think that's the beauty of this kind of peer-to-peer funding. And it's very, very different than, sending a check to United Healthcare.
Yeah. So that's a really good segue. I was going to ask you, what have you learned about the community as far as giving goes? Like, maybe I don't give a shit about Tony in Cincinnati and whatever he has going on in his health life. Have you found it's like maybe 50-50 that people pay and don't pay, or is the percentage way higher?
Way higher. It's like 98% say yes. Because it's like, look, I mean, it's hard to say no to another human being who's asking for help, right? It really is. It's like, I want to, will you please help me? No, I'm not going to help you with your pregnancy or your torn ACL or your face bike plant. And so most people say yes, and there is actually, if I'm requesting something from the community, you get to know who I am by with two things. One is, you'll know if I'm a good member of the community. So if I've been asked the 10 times, have I said yes, 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 or have I said no, 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 no? You'll see that in my request. So you'll know if I'm a good member of the community, right? And so that's helpful. Like, everybody wants to be a good member of the community. And the other thing you'll find out is, like, is my bill a reasonable bill? Like, did I treat your money, who I'm asking, for money, like it's my own money? Or did I just go out and get whatever, the most expensive doctor on the planet who may not be very good? And I don't really give a shit if it costs $5,000 or $50,000. Somebody else is paying for it, And so those are two things that about the community that does help manage the behavior a little bit.
Okay.
So I think that's important. And then the other thing, real quick too, is we have built a community. I mean, people feel like they're a part of something, and that's cool, because when you're with health insurance and something goes wrong, you think the health insurance is trying to screw you. At least I do. It feels like I'm in battle with my health insurance to get this thing paid. And so we tried to suck as much value out of the system as possible. Whereas with us, like, we're in a community of people, and it's like, if you're trying to screw the system, you're just screwing other human beings. Like, it's much harder to screw other human beings than it is to screw a big health corporation that doesn't feel like they give a shit about you, right? And so we've had lots of people come back and and be like, we had a guy with colon cancer who's like, man, I got colon cancer. This is bad, I know, but please, will you help me find, really great providers at a low cost, because I don't want to screw the community. Most people, if they had colon cancer, they'd be like, screw the community. I'm worried about myself. Right. Like, and I was blown away. I was just like, wow, like there is behavior change here, because they know, like, if they behave, badly, it doesn't impact a company. It impacts a group of people. That's hard to do.
That's amazing. Well, I think the visibility on the claim is really interesting. It's almost like an Airbnb or an Uber, where it's like, I'm not going to book a place that's got 2 stars on Airbnb, and it goes both ways, right? The person with the Airbnb can then rank the person who's going to stay there and vice versa. And so you have good visibility. Is this a good guest? Is this a good host? You kind of understand those things. And it reminds me too. So a few weeks ago, I just joined this new kind of gym to train my people in the wintertime, and it's a couple that own it, and it's in a warehouse, and it's open 24/7, but it's only the 2 of them that run the thing. And so they're only there 12 hours, and they've got cameras and things like that. But like you can go there and not pay. You could go there and steal all the supplements that are out for anybody. Yeah. And what it creates is this huge amount of trust and ownership in the members. The members love it. They're all super happy and positive and optimistic. And they self-regulate everything. Like if you go there and you're a douchebag, like it's not going to fly with these members. They feel like they're loved and trusted. They're on a first name basis with the owners and vice versa. And so it regulates itself. And it sounds like this system is almost exactly the same way.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, it is the same way. And we just have story after story where people have stepped up for the community, and it's a beautiful thing. It really is kind of fun to be a part of the community, because it does feel like we're all a part of the similar tribe, which is, the people who are in our community are generally like fall into one of 3 groups. They're either keto carnivore people, because we've made some, big strides, and that's me. That's who I am. So it's, a lot of the people who are in our group share characteristics with me, because it's what I'm passionate about. Keto carnivore people, they're Bitcoin people who generally are significantly more healthy than the national average, or they are kind of an alternative medicine type group, which is kind of like a holistic naturopathic kind of crew who don't like Western medicine and are anti-pharma, which, like those are 3 characteristics of me too. And so I just am naturally drawn to those folks. And so that's who's become a part of our community. But each one of those groups have some overlap, which I think is, they know that the big institutions are not in it to see them thrive. They're in it to make a ton of money and, reap the rewards of, denying claims and, taking your money from you and, jabbing you with vaccines and stuff. And so, our tribe is overlaps in a lot of different ways. And they're like, man, this is one of my people. I don't want to screw them. And so it's a cool thing to be a part of.
So in the community, will I actually get to know the other people? Like, again, Tony in Cincinnati, do I communicate with him? Do I see his picture? Do I know about his life? Or do I just see his name and see how many times he's contributed before I decide to contribute or not?
Yeah, you see that first. But I mean, I say we've got a great community on social, so you get to meet people on social. I was at a conference back, when was it? May, June. And we had a happy hour where I think 125 or 130 CrowdHealth members came out to our happy hour. And so, I love some of the ideas actually that you just threw out. Like, how do we continue to build community in a way that does promote, good behavior and all the other great things that come along with community? So if anybody else has any ideas out there, definitely, hit me up on Twitter or somewhere and let me know, because I'd love some more ideas on how we can continue to build this community.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I just think you'd get so much more buy-in. I mean, you know what it's like to attend a conference, and you've seen people, you've heard people, you get to meet them, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, these are all my buds. Like, this is great.
Yeah,
you're way more likely to support them, or appear on podcasts and things like that. So I'm wondering if you've noticed a trend, or you maybe even expect a trend, as more and more people join. I imagine more and more people join in those communities, keto, carnivore, who typically, again, maybe some injuries, pregnancies, but really are not experiencing a lot of cost as far as chronic health goes. Do you imagine that over time, as your numbers grow of people that are actually healthy, do you think the costs will kind of trend downwards over time?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that ultimately what ends up happening is people do age up with you, right? Like if I join and I'm 44, so I joined when I was 40 or 41, and so as if I'm with CrowdHealth for another 10 years, I will be more likely to have health events 10 years from now than I do today. Just it's unfortunately the fact of aging, but so people do tend to age up with us, and so costs will go up, but costs will go up very much lower at a much lower rate than health insurance because we're able to keep those rates down, so significantly. I'll give you a quick example. We have a woman who needs brain surgery, and so her local neurosurgeon said it was going to be $68,000. And there was a hospital, like an excellent hospital, like 20 miles down the road, that was willing to do it for like $24,000. And this is with a neurosurgeon that is highly acclaimed neurosurgeon was willing to do it for much lower.
Wow.
And so it's like things like that if we can continue to keep those big costs down, we think that the costs will be relatively flat. They'll go up a little bit, but relatively flat and way slower growth than health insurance. I talked to a buddy just last week who runs a company. He's like, his health insurance is going up 20% next year. Like that's just not sustainable.
That's crazy. Wow. Okay. So there are brackets for age then. You age into different brackets and then pay a little more based on what your predictive costs are going to be. Is anybody not accepted into the program?
Two groups of people. One, if you're over 240, then you are not accepted. We make exceptions for really, really tall people. If you are a smoker, then you are not accepted. So those are the only two reasons why we wouldn't accept you into the community.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to explain?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing is we do have a limit on what the community what we'll submit to the community on pre-existing conditions. So, if you have a big pre-existing condition, we just don't think it's fair for you to jump in and stick that with other people. And so what we do for that is say, hey, you can come in and you own your own pre-existing condition. And then once you're a part of the community and shown that you're a part of the community, then you can start, submitting pre-existing conditions to the community, but it's after 2 years. So you have to own your own pre-existing condition after 2 years. And that's the other one that, trips people up a little bit. So, you can't jump in if you're pregnant, have a baby, stick the community with a $15,000 bill and then take off again. Like, you actually have to be a part of the community to be able to do that. So that's the only other thing. Pregnancies, we basically say that if your due date is less than 300 days from when you start, then that's not eligible for funding.
I see.
So, it's like I said, you just can't jump in and have your baby, then jump back out. So 300 days is basically gestation period plus a couple weeks. And so it's pretty close. But, if you're already pregnant, that's the one where we'll negotiate the bills for you, but we're not submitting that to the community for funding.
Yeah, I see. And I guess I'm assuming you're not doing anything related to like fertility treatments or things like that.
No.
Yeah, just the pregnancy itself.
That's on your own. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I didn't think Netflix could get me interested in racing cars and Formula One, and it did. I didn't think I'd ever be interested in health insurance, and you've gotten me interested in health insurance. It's so fascinating. What a great system. And I want to make a pivot here. I've had lots of people try to explain this to me, and I know it's in your wheelhouse, so maybe you can get me excited about this as well. Have to give a shout out to my client, Garrett Gunderson, who writes about finances. He wrote the book, Disrupting Sacred Cows, that has an entire chapter that's all about blockchain and Bitcoin, and that was one of the better explanations I've gotten about how any of that works. It's still very confusing to me. Do you have a way to explain what Bitcoin is and how people use it? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think people try to go down the rabbit hole on this and try to understand kind of the mechanics of how it all works. But I just say it's this, most of what we do on a day-to-day basis is electronic money. I can go look in my pocket and I probably have $5 or something in my wallet. So most of the time it's electronic money. So that's really not a lot different than Bitcoin. You transfer money around electronically. The great thing about Bitcoin is there's no government in between making sure that, who sends it and who receives it and what they're doing with it and all this kind of stuff. So you get the government intervention out of that. I think the big thing, at least for me on Bitcoin, is, we have printed in this money trillions of dollars over the last few years. I think it's something like half of the money supply has been created in the last, decade or something like that. Goodness. And as such, we're seeing inflation, skyrocket. Like, things are more expensive now than they were just 2 or 3 years ago. And so if you have more money in the system with the same amount of goods or a similar amount of goods being purchased, those goods that you're purchasing, the cost of those are going to rise. Like, that's what we're seeing. But it's this government who continues to push out money, to print money, to pay for things that, wars and benefits for people and entitlements and all these kinds of things. It is devaluing, money. And that's the problem that I have. Like, the money I make this year is going to be worth significantly less next year. The difference with Bitcoin is that the amount of Bitcoin never changes. Right. So you cannot introduce more Bitcoin into the system, and therefore there is no inflationary impact on Bitcoin. And if you think about it, if there's a limited number of Bitcoin available, then, and if the government was on a Bitcoin standard, like they're buying in Bitcoin, you can't have these huge deficits that we're currently having to fund all these things that we don't want to fund. Because it's impossible with being on a Bitcoin standard. Just like in the 1970s when we were on a gold standard, we could not, spend more than the gold that we had, and so it kept the government from, having huge deficits. It was illegal to have these deficits. Change that in the 70s. As such, we've pretty much been in deficit, for the last 20 years, right? And I think that's going to have a massive detrimental impact on, the economy, my kids, my kids' kids. And I think it's ultimately going to take down the dollar. And so, I'm investing in Bitcoin because I think the dollar is going to be dethroned from being the world currency, just like every other world currency in the history of man has been dethroned at some point, primarily because of overprinting of that money. And I think the United States dollar it's going to happen to the United States dollar too in the next 10 to 20 years is my guess.
I mean, what you're describing, like, that system cannot be sustainable. Like, trying to think of what the end game of that is going to be is not great. You see that happen in South American countries all the time, where they have to switch currencies because the other one has crashed. Yeah, or inflation is like through the roof. It happened in Brazil when I was living there. It's insane. Wow.
That's exactly right. Wow. That's exactly right. And I think the United States currency is going to go the way of some of those other currencies. Everybody looks at the British pound and they say, oh, the British pound has been around for, I don't know what it is, 1,500 years or something like that, 2,000 years. The problem with that is the British pound has also gotten devalued by 90% over the last 100 years. And so the British pound lost its status as the world currency too. And so what would happen to the United States dollar if they lost 90% of its value? We would all be toast. And so that's why, for me, I hold probably right now 25 or 30% of my net worth in Bitcoin, because I think it's going to go up, and if it's a great hedge, I think, against the dollar, which I think is going to go down. So that's why I hold Bitcoin.
Yeah, interesting. How would you recommend dummies like me get started? Not really into finances or currency. Like, what would you recommend as far as like getting into this space?
Yeah, I mean, some people are like very purist about this, like, and not to get into too many details, but I think you should just go on, like, Strike is one of my favorites. So go on Strike, and you can buy Bitcoin off of Stripe. You can leave it, or Strike, STRIKE. You can buy it on Strike and just leave it there. And it's, if you do want to use your Bitcoin to buy something, it's super easy to do off of Strike, almost as easy as using a credit card. So go to Strike, put a little bit in Bitcoin, and at a minimum, just put a little bit in there. I think it's going to go up, many, many, many fold over the next, 5 to 10 years. And so put a little bit in there and play with it and try it. I think it's going to be a pretty significant player in how we transact funds, in the future.
Wow. Amazing. Well, thank you for that explanation. One of the more chilling things I've heard on our podcast is having Dr. Thomas Seyfried come on and tell us that cancer is a revenue creating disease. Cancer is a revenue-creating disease. Chilling. And he said the system will never change until there's a financial incentive to change it. We need entrepreneurs to find ways to somehow financially incentivize metabolic health treatments for cancer. Otherwise, they're never going to see the light of day because they don't generate nearly as much revenue. And I just think of your work as being an entrepreneur, finding a different system, a different way of going about things is just absolutely wonderful. I love what you're doing. I'm definitely going to be signing up, and I can't wait to be a part of the community. And,
Thanks. I appreciate that.
It's nice. It's cool to think that I am helping somebody else. And if something were to happen to me, that I might get that support as well. So really appreciate you and your work and taking time out of your day to come on our show today. Andy, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah. Join CrowdHealth, joincrowdhealth.com is our website. Go check that out. The great thing about if you want to sign up is it takes like 5 minutes. And so it's super easy. It is not one of these long Obamacare. You got to go get your, W-2 forms and things like that. It takes 5 minutes. We'd love for y'all to join us. We're at Join CrowdHealth on all the major social media, platforms as well. So we're probably most active on Twitter. So if you're on Twitter, come in and check us out. We get a little sassy about what's going on in our healthcare system. And so it's, for nothing else, come over for a little healthcare sassiness. I think a lot of people, especially as this airs, are thinking about health insurance and what they're going to do for next year. All we ask is go and check out Join CrowdHealth and, schedule a 15-minute, call with us to learn more about what we're up to. Because I think when you hear about what we're doing, it's so significantly different and way, way better than health insurance. It's kind of funny. One of our members on Twitter it was yesterday or the day before, I can't remember. His comment was something like, and this was his tweet, so it wasn't even a response to us. Out of the blue, we got this tweet that says, "It's just so silly how much better CrowdHealth is than health insurance. I just can't even understand it." So, it's silly how much better, we are than health insurance. And then one other quick thing on this is, I forgot to mention, it's one of the coolest things as part of the company that I think is when you join CrowdHealth, you will have a team of 2 people in CrowdHealth that you can contact at all times. So you got a group of people. We're not a call center. You're not calling into somebody in India. Like it's 2 people that you'll be able to talk to anytime you want that can care for you. And that's a really cool thing because they get to know you, they get to know your family, they get to know what's going on with you. And, if you have something pop up, you can contact them quickly and they'll get back to you. And that's a really cool thing. So anyway, come and join the crowd. We'd love to have you.
That's amazing. I just thought of one more question I want you to explain.
Sure.
Wellness visits, things that people might do like annually, I think would be important to touch on real quick.
Yeah, sure. So you can submit one wellness visit up to $300 per year per member. And a wellness visit we consider a primary care visit, OBGYN, pediatric, dental, or vision. So you can use any one of those 5 once a year. Okay. So up to $300.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, This has been an amazing conversation. I hope to meet you in person eating brisket and watching Formula One at some point.
Would love it. Let's do it.
Absolutely. But until then, we'd love to join the community and be part of it. And again, just really appreciate you and the work that you're doing. It's really something very awesome. And this was a great conversation. So thank you very much, Andy, for coming on today. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Casey.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. As always, thank you so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio. I know I say this all the time, but I really do mean it. It has been such a joy to make and produce this podcast and to watch it grow. Our business started in the pandemic in July of 2020, and we started the podcast in October of 2020. So it has been 3 years now, and to see that we have generated over 400,000 downloads worldwide is just simply unbelievable to me. This year in particular has been such a blast to travel to different health conferences and not only meet some of our amazing guests, but also to meet many of you, our listeners and supporters. We really just can't thank you you enough. As always, feel free to book a complimentary 30-minute session on our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. On our homepage, there is a Book Now button where you can find a time to speak with us about health, fitness, nutrition, whatever you like. We've loved chatting with people all over the world and many of you out there to bounce ideas off each other or to try to come up with plans to achieve specific goals, or even if it's just to reach out to introduce yourselves, we would just love to meet you and connect with you there. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel if you'd like to watch these full interviews, and also the shorter interviews on more specific topics that are taken from these full interviews. We've gotten really good feedback over there. It's also a really fun way to interact with people who comment. We read and reply to every single YouTube comment we get, so head on over there if you want to start a conversation and watch these videos. As always, if you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. It really is the best way to make sure this podcast gets out there to more listeners. We've been able to keep Boundless Body Radio ad-free for 3 years and really want to continue to do so, and so your 5-star ratings and reviews are the best way to support us at Boundless Body and support the podcast. Cheers. Thank you again so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio.